He did a great job, didn't he? He did a fantastic. So when we had a planning meeting several weeks back, Scott, Evan, and Holly and I, just talking about what we were going to be doing and kind of, I was going to finish up our first half on Romans, then Evan was going to kick off with worship and what it is, and I thought he did a fantastic job explaining what it is to bring offerings, bring sacrifices to God. And it's not so much about what you bring, but where you bring it from, the person that's bringing it, and what position you offer it to God from. So then we thought the next logical step of that will be talking about grace and works. If you guys were here 2 weeks ago when we finished up Romans, we talked about the relationship between sin and grace. And Romans chapter 6, how Romans 5 had been talking about, and really 3 through 5, had been talking about how that grace was so much greater than sin, and because we sinned, that grace increased, and it was overflowing and abounding. And then Romans 6 kind of steps in and says, but we're not going to sin just to have more grace. And so Paul really draws a line there. And then with the worship last week, this week we're going to look at the relationship between grace and works. What does my faith that brings me grace have to do with my physical works? What do I have to do or not have to do to receive that and to continue to receive that gift? And so we're going to ask a couple pretty tough questions. We're going to look at a few pretty important points, and we're going to cover several things that are relatively controversial. And what I want you guys to do, we don't have time to go in depth into all of them. When you hear something, I want you to write it down on your little sketch pad. Everybody got one of those? You got it? A little pad? You got a little pen? Everything like that? All right, don't draw doodles, particularly of me like with a mustache or anything like that. Write those notes down, okay? And make sure you look into that. We're going to be going over terms like sanctification, once saved, always saved, a whole bunch of different theological, ethical points that I need you guys to dig into on your own, because I would need like 3 months up here to talk about all of them. All right, so where do we start with all that? Well, we're going to start with 3 words. In 1988, there was a company, 1988, the year after I was born, great time for mankind, just saying. All right, there was a company, that was a joke, sarcasm, I'm sorry. We'll get coffee later, okay? There was a company that was already doing well in the form of $877 million annual income. That went to the next level with a new advertising campaign, a new slogan for their company, and it was 3 words. Who can guess what that is? Where's the... Not quite, but that's a good one. It was good? Just do it. Just do it. With the little check, Nike, at the end. All right, so they went from $877 million in annual income to $9.2 billion in annual income with 3 words. And that, obviously that's a pretty good, if we could say just do it and like $9 billion pops out, you'd be like, woohoo, try that. Just say, just do it. Did anybody get 9 billion? Because if you did, I want half. All right, so, but anyways, as we go through and we look at that, there's been a lot of debate as to why that caused such an uproar. Why is that a household thing now? When you see Nike, you think, hey, just do it. Or when you hear somebody say, man, just do it, you think of that little check inside your head, all right? So what is the deal? A lot of people believe that it's because it represents a mindset that we as a society have idolized. We want to be doers. We want to be people that get things done. We want to be people that start businesses or are executives or drive, these nice cars. We just do it. We go out and we work out. We get it done. We grind and we go home and we're good. But we're not, generally speaking. How many of you guys in here are procrastinators? Probably shouldn't raise your hand for that one. See, look, if you raised your hand instantly, you're probably not a procrastinator. All right? See what I did there? All right? I should raise like both hands and my leg, like all my fingers and toes. Like I am the worst. If you say, hey, Josh, Friday at 12, this needs to be done. Is Kathy in here for sermon notes? How many times? I don't know. She's told me, Josh, Wednesday at 12, sermon notes need to be in. And when I'm doing her personal training Wednesday at 11:30, I'm like, here's my notes. All right? Makes sense? I'm like that in life. It's hard not to procrastinate. However, one of the greatest wastes in life our lost opportunities. In fact, look at this. It didn't work last time. I'm really excited now. Every day you wake up and are given an opportunity to do something with your life for the people around you, the people that you're friends with, the people that your family's with, people that you love and want to give something to. However, we are only promised right now. So most of the time, how many of you guys have ever thought something great about your spouse and never said anything about it? Come on, guys, don't leave me hanging. Am I the only one? Don't raise your hand. That's a bad idea, particularly if your spouse is sitting next to you. All right? But look, and so I'm guilty of it. Heidi will bring me coffee. I don't know if you guys know this about me, but I have a love affair with coffee. Like, I hate getting up in the morning, and coffee is what saves everybody I meet before 10 a.m. from a horrible death. All right? And so every once in a while, we'll be talking. We talk about every morning, either through text or she'll call me or whatever. And if she can tell that I'm stressed, a lot of times she will show up with a cup of coffee. And that makes it's a $1 Keurig cup. It's not a big deal. But man, how awesome is that? And how few times do I let her know, do I just say what I need to say that is awesome? And so what I want us to do today as we kind of progress into this is I want us to keep in mind how many times as human beings, moms, dads, brothers, sisters, husbands, wives, friends, family members, do we think things and say, man, I should really do that, but we don't do it. Where we see an opportunity that we could serve and make a difference in somebody's life, but because it's inconvenient or it's uncomfortable or I'm tired, or maybe God will send somebody else to be in their life, do we just let it slide by the wayside? And before we get into that, we have to answer one very, very important and potentially invasive question. Who tempts us? Whose fault is it when we are tempted and we are drawn away from God? We're going to go through here in James. James is my favorite book of the Bible. It's always related to me. And we're going to read through most of the first chapter. And while we're reading through this, I want you guys to realize and recognize how many action words are in this chapter. How many times is he talking about doing things, not just sitting back and letting others handle it for us, but doing things, persevering, giving, driving forward to get to the goal that God has laid out for us. Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. This is like my life verse right here. Because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. Let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. If any of you lacks wisdom, you should ask God, who gives generously to all without finding fault, and it will be given to you. But when you ask, you must believe and not doubt, because the one who doubts is like a wave of the sea blown and tossed by the wind. That person should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Such a person is double-minded and unstable in all they do. Let's draw a quick comparison here. The person who listens to God and does what he's supposed to do, and he perseveres, what does he receive? This maturity, this faith, this gift, right? And the person who doesn't, who doubts himself, who second guesses himself, who asks for things, but he's kind of wishy-washy and he's not sure what to do, is useless and unstable in all they do. See the difference? See the comparison? In verse 9, it goes on, believers in humble circumstances ought to take pride in their high position, but rich should take pride in their humiliation, since they will pass away like a wild flower. For the sun rises with scorching heat and withers the plant. Its blossom falls and its beauty is destroyed. In the same way, the rich will fade away even while they go about their business. Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial. See how we're going back to that? Blessed is the one who perseveres under trial. Having stood the test, that person will receive the crown of life that the Lord has promised to those who love him. The crown of life sounds pretty awesome, just saying. When tempted, no one should say, God is tempting me. Here's where we're really getting to the good stuff. For God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone, but each person is tempted when they are dragged away by Satan. By demons? By God? By their own evil desire and enticed. Then, after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin. And sin, when it's full grown, gives birth to death. We are the source of our downfalls. There is nobody to blame. There is no higher force to blame. God did not give us that. Satan did not make us that way. That is our fault. We are to blame. When we act, we are the ones who are acting. When we don't act, we are the ones who are not acting. When we fall away from God, we're the ones who jump off the cliff. Nobody pushed us. Now, I'm not saying that there aren't Satan and his forces working in the world against Christians. I'm not saying there are temptations and circumstances outside of your control. What I am saying is when you decide to walk down a path that leads away from God or that goes against his wishes, that is your decision. And only when you take full responsibility for your actions, there's no other cause for them besides you, can you realize how important it is that we listen to what God has to say in our life about works. Make sense? We don't do works because God's blessed us. We don't do works because we're trying to get away from Satan. We do works because we're the children of God. We do works because he lived and he died and he rose again for our lives, and we want to spread the news. So we do things that help that happen. This is a pretty constant theme throughout the Bible. In fact, most of the times when you see people that are raised up in the Bible, they are people that are not perfect. They've got tons of sin. In fact, we'll go through one here in a little bit. But they're glorified and they're exalted because of the things they did, not just the words they said or the beliefs they held. We should both listen and do. That is our main point. We should both listen and do. All throughout the Bible talks about people that are just like this. In fact, I told you we were going to talk about one. King David. How many of you guys know stories about King David? Everybody, right? No, we need Bible school in here. All right, there we go. We got it. All right, King David. What's the first story pretty much every child ever that goes to church hears? It's David and the what? And Goliath. They generally leave that like he chopped his head off after that. We're just not going to touch that. Oh, wait, the kids are in here. Ooh, sorry. All right. But so anyways, the first story you hear is David and Goliath. And then you hear about how David took over the nation, and when Saul tried to, he took him under his wing, and everybody liked David more, and, he was trying to kill him. He had this whole army out searching for David, and David snuck up on him in the cave, and he spared Saul's life. And everybody hears about how he was a prophet and how he brought all these great things to Israel, but very few people talk about how he was an adulterer and how his first, that we know of, his first affair, he had her husband, who was one of his captains in the army, killed. Like, that's not a great dude. But yet in the Bible it says that he was a man after God's own heart, and he was glorified, or he was raised up in the Bible, not because of what he believed or that he was sinless. He's given that position because of what he did for God. It goes on in verse 19, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this." Stand up, hold up, and listen. "Everybody should be quick to listen." Oh, look at that. "Slow to speak and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you." That's actually kind of hard to say together. "Which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves." Let's try that again. "Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says." In my mind, stupid's written behind it. Do what it says, stupid. I like words like that. Like I really, when God says, do this, I'm like, oh, okay, I can do that. Like, that's what I like this. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and after looking at himself goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. Here's the really important part. "Whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do." Guys, there's a big parallel that the author of this book is drawing here. And he's saying, look, if you listen to God, if you accept him as your Lord and Savior, if you're doing all these things and your faith, it stands the test of all these trials. It perseveres. And when it's done persevering, it matures into this thing called a Christian walk. A lot of churches call that sanctification, right? The process of me becoming sanctified, all right, through my life and walking with God. It's a big word. I can't spell it, so I try not to use them often. But just so you know what it's called, if you ever hear somebody say, I'm being sanctified, that's another way for God's growing me, and it really hurts. I wish it would stop. All right? And so that sanctification process, that growth process, or we see the other parallel where God's saying, or you can doubt him. You can ask for things, but they're not really what he wants. And maybe you can go into your lives, but you're not sure what you need to do or who you need to talk to. Or maybe you are sure, but you don't do it. And that gift's taken away from you. You're worthless like a wave of a sea, tossed and blown by the winds. Which leads us to our next question. Where do good works and service stand in our salvation? Guys, this is a really, really big question and a rather controversial one, all right? Where do these acts, these services that we do, and our faith, which produces grace, stand as they work together? Because there's a lot of controversy. Some people will say one thing and other people will say the others. So what we're going to do, we're going to skip ahead to James chapter 2, verse 14. Everybody go ahead and turn there with me if you got it, or click your little phone to get there. We're going to put it up on the screen. We're going to see what it has to say. Then we're going to go over those three main views, okay? James 2, chapter 14. What good is it, my brothers and sisters, if someone claims to have faith but has no deeds? Can such faith save them? That's the question. If I have faith but I'm doing nothing, can I be saved? Can that faith save me? Suppose a brother or a sister without clothes or daily food. And if one of you says to them, go in peace, be warm and well fed, but does nothing to their physical needs, what good is it? How many of you guys have ever been down in the dumps, beaten, battered, bloody, and just ready to give up? And somebody says, oh man, I'm sorry, I'll pray for you. And you're like, well, that ain't doing me a lick of good. You want to kick them in the shins, don't you? I do. Maybe that's just me. I'm a little violent. All right? But sometimes we need more than a word of encouragement. All right? And this is what the author of James here is talking about. If we see somebody that's in this perilous circumstances, if we see somebody that's going through this time, and we just say, hey, go, good job, keep your chin up, Tyke, hey, high five, air, high five, no? All right? What are we really doing for them? What good is it? Going on in verse 17, in the same way, faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. Ouch. Let's read that again. Faith by itself, if it is not accompanied by action, is dead. But some will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. It's a really, really, really important verse right there, and it goes a long way to answering the question that we just asked. Someone will say, you have faith, I have deeds. Then the author, unquote, show me your faith without deeds, and I will show you my faith by my deeds. You believe that there is one God. Good. Even the demons believe that. It's a tough comparison, guys. And they shudder. You foolish person, do you want evidence that faith without deeds is useless? There are three predominant views on this. Saved by grace, through faith, very little effort required. And this is not necessarily a biblical teaching that some people hold. Some people practice this in their lives without really realizing they believe this. Some people believe this in general. One of the terminologies or one of the doctrines that comes from this is called once saved, always saved. And so basically the idea is if I go through the sinner's prayer, that God comes into my life, there's nothing else required, and I'm a Christian. All right? And that's not necessarily bad, but that's kind of the far left corner. Saved by grace through faith, no works required, no baptism, nothing after that. Once saved, always saved, I'm good. All right. Then we come over here to the right side of the podium, and it's saved by works, mostly, with little grace required. And what we mean by that is, initially, I'm saved by grace, but if I don't do works, then I fall out of salvation, and I'm no longer saved, because those are what keeps me in God's presence. All right? That's not God that keeps me there. It's not my faith in him. It has nothing to do with that. It's the works. And if I don't have works, then I'm not a Christian, or I never was a Christian. That's how a lot of people say it. Well, they fell away from the church, and maybe they were never a Christian to begin with. That's a really dangerous path to go down, by the way. And then there's somewhere right in the middle. We're saved by grace and validated by works. It's a big difference. Saved by grace and validated by works, which is where our denomination or our church, we don't really have a denomination, our church would fall. And basically what that's saying is works have nothing to do with your salvation. All right? So when you decide to accept Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you acknowledge him personally and in the open, you're baptized by him, and then you continue your life in discipleship. All right? But that has nothing to do with how good or bad you are. That's a decision that you make and a gift he gives freely. We're not saved by our works after that. Like they're not an entry fee into heaven. You don't have to teach so many kids' churches on Sunday to get to see, Jesus. That's not what we believe. What we do believe is that your salvation, your faith is validated by your works. Meaning, if I really love Jesus, if I really believe what we come here and talk about, if you think about it, some of the stuff we do is kind of silly. Like we take juice and bread and we say it's his body and his blood and we're like, oh, it's good, all right? It's kind of silly if you look at it from an atheistic point of view, all right? We bow our heads and we pray to who? Like if we don't believe it, what are we doing? But if we really believe, if we really think, hey, this is the way I want to go with my life, this is what I want to teach my children, this is how I want to bring my friends into my family and everything like that, and we do that, then those works will be a natural extension of it, almost like the fruits of the Spirit. So if Sunday school, let's say kids' church, how many kids are in here? Kids, stand up, clap your hands. How many kids? Woo, stand up, clap your hands. You can do it. You can do it. There we go. Yeah, all right. See, we got a lot of kids in here because, why? Is Holly here? Is Holly here? No, she's not, because she had to run one and we didn't have anybody else to run the other kids' service. But that way, when we see that, and if we're really following after Christ and we see that hole and we see that need and we say, oh man, I got to go do, no, we're happy to step in. If our gift is helping kids, come on, we'll lock you in the room with them. All right? If your gift is singing, then you say, hey, man, Evan needs a break. All right? Come on, Evan can use you. Maybe it's playing the drums. How unfair is it, by the way, that Evan can play the guitar, sing, do this little thing, and clap at the same time? He's looking at us like we're crazy, and I'm looking at him like, dude, I can't walk and talk. Like, come on now. All right? So, anyways, we need people like that. And so, our belief is that if you really are believing and you're following that way, then those are natural extensions. They validate my faith because they show that I am serious about it. So, our statement on that would be works are essential to our salvation in that if they are not present, our commitment to our Savior is hollow and fake. And ouch, that seems really harsh, but it is really true. And that's not me saying it. That's what the author of James is saying. If we are not working, if we are not giving of our times, our talent, our tithe, of our personal efforts, in church, out of church, throughout our whole life, then are we really committed? The answer is no. How many people want to look like something, but they don't want to be that something? They don't want to have to give up the things to have that lifestyle. Does anybody remember the commercial? I love commercials today. I don't know why. I've been thinking about them all week. It was a Super Bowl commercial years and years ago, and it's this guy, and he's got like this Hawaiian t-shirt on, and he's driving on. He's like, I got a 64-inch zero-turn lawnmower. And then he's like in his house. He's like, I just redid my kitchen. And, he's got this like fake smile on, and then he's in the back porch cooking the grill, and he's like throwing the burgers off, and he's like smiling but crying. He's like, I'm up to my eyeballs in debt. Please help me. Like, how many of us know people like that where they're like, man, look at that car. Like, holy cow, look at their shoes. They paid but you look at their bank account and they're like, I got 32 cents until tomorrow. All right? Or how many of us, to bring it a little bit more home, spouses. How many of us say we love our wives, but don't do anything about it? How many of you guys call your wife and tell her you love her? How many of you guys leave a cool little note or whatever it is she wants? For me personally, Heidi likes it when I do the dishes. And so about once every 6 months, I'm just picking, all right? It's once a year, don't get crazy. All right, I'll go in and do the dishes. And to her, that is a big deal. To me, it's an annoyance. I hate dishes with a passion that burns in my soul. All right, but to her, that's a big deal. And so as we move forward and you look at that, that is how works are required in our life. If we're really in love with our spouse, how do we show it? If we really want to be wealthy, how much are we saving of our money? If we really want to be Christians, are we actually doing the work to be good Christians? Let's take a look at this. Was not our father Abraham considered righteous for what he did? This is moving on in verse 21 of the second chapter of James, by the way. For what he did, offered his son Isaac on the altar. You guys remember that story? Abraham had prayed and cried and wept and fasted and everything because he wanted to have a son. And God gave him this son, and he was everything Abraham ever dreamed of. And he loved him more than anything else on earth. And then God said, hey, I want you to sacrifice your son to me. Abraham had faith. He had some actions. But God wanted the ultimate sacrifice. And the scripture was fulfilled that says, Abraham believed God and was credited to him as righteousness. And he was called God's friend. You see that a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. Now, in case you guys are wondering, he didn't actually sacrifice his son Isaac there on the altar. God changed his mind. He just wanted to make sure that Abraham was serious. A lot of times, we are justified by what we're willing to do for God. It goes on there right in verse 24. You see, a person is considered righteous by what they do and not by faith alone. One without the other is absent. It's hollow. In the same way was not even Rahab, remember the prostitute, when Joshua, good name, was leading the people into the city and she held the spies. Remember that, the story? And she ended up being tortured, basically, because she hid them and helped them infiltrate Jericho. And then she gave lodging to the spies and sent them off in a different direction, talking about the people chasing them. As body without the spirit is dead, so faith without deeds is dead. How was Abraham justified? The father of the Israelite nation, the father of their faith. He was justified not by what he believed, not by what he said, but by what he did in conjunction with that. We learn another thing from Abraham. Our trials and works can be one in the same. Sometimes, as a Christian, you will have to do things that you just don't like. Plain as day. God never said, come to me, all my children, and your life will be easy. It's not in the Bible anywhere, right? He did say that he would give us joy. And he did say that he will give us the strength to overcome all the obstacles, but he did not say that he would protect us from every danger and evil that came along. While you're doing this, one thing I've learned in my life, and it used to bother me a lot, particularly when I first started boxing, you'd have a lot of people say a lot of things about Josh is amazing, or Josh is horrible, or everything like that. And you hear that a lot in churches too. Like you'll hear about, maybe it's somebody talking about Scott, or somebody talking about the elders, or somebody talking about whoever. What I have learned over time is people who talk about other people are the ones who have time to do so. Meaning, they're not doing anything. The ones who are out there talking crap and saying junk and gossiping about others are the ones who aren't out there putting their feet on the ground and working. Are the ones who aren't out there starting the businesses, who aren't in the childcare, who aren't up on stage like Scott is planning a church, who aren't singing the songs like Evan. And so before you take into credit what other people say about you, think about what God is doing with you. Does it really matter what other people think about you? No, it does not. We have a couple takeaways. Number one, take responsibility. It is nobody's fault but yours where you're at in your life. It is nobody's fault but yours where you're at in your spiritual walk. Number two, stop complaining. What good is it going to do? I'm such a horrible person. I never should have done whatever. Number three, just do it. Even put a little check mark next to it on the end of it. Just do it, guys. Get out there and do it. Go out there, make your mark, put in your work. You have a gift with kids, man, come on, we need you. Maybe you do well singing. Get up here. Evan needs you. Can you listen to others? Can you help with addictions? Can you counsel people? Maybe you can sell cars to them. Maybe you can cut their hair. Maybe you can mow their yard. Whatever it is that you do well, you can do that well for God. And God has called you to do that. And so my challenge to you guys today is as you go out into your lives, analyze it. Do I really act upon what I need to act upon with my spouse? Do I act upon what I need to do, what God has called me to do with my children? Do I really act out what God wants me to act out in my workplace, with my friends? And if the answer is no, which I guarantee you, if you're honest, you don't have to tell anybody else, be honest with yourself. At least one or two areas you're going to find what you're doing is lacking. And that's, guys, everybody's got that. I don't want you all to think that, man, Josh beat the tar out of us today. Like, you should have seen me, like, studying for the sermon. I was, like, downstairs, like, oh, it hurts so bad. Like, there are points in my life, a lot of areas, where I do stuff, but it's for the wrong reasons. So I challenge you guys to go out this week, examine your life, examine your relationships, examine what you're doing in here at church. Talk with Holly, help in the kids area, get up here and get out of your comfort zone and sing. Offer to help counsel somebody. Maybe offer to go mow somebody's yard or help them with their faucet or whatever it is. Do what you do for God.